it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello. So after yet another weekend of mixed fortunes in the fantasy sphere, you find us once more here with differing demeanours. Sam, happy, content, loving life, despite a potential live transfer in the offing. I've been trailed, and me kind of wishing I didn't have to pod after such was the weekend I had. Albeit I've now opened a beer and magically all feels better. Alcohol, the cause and solution to all life's problems, as a great man once said. But do drink responsibly. This is one of 2 nights a week I have a few beers. I don't do this all the time. I have an interview tomorrow as well, so I won't be going mad. And anyway, yes, FPL. I suppose we better talk about it. And I'm joined by happy Sam. And in some ways, it makes me happy that you're happy. Because it's been a miserable few weeks for you, hasn't it?
Yeah, it certainly has. I think I've been through the ringer a little bit in the last few game weeks. Starting to wonder what a green arrow looks like and whether or not I'd ever break the top 2 million. So yeah, it's quite nice to have a good week. Southampton won as well, so that always adds a little bit of a Brucey bonus to it as well. So yeah, all things looking quite rosy for once, but I know that these things come and go pretty quickly, so I'll try and cherish it whilst it lasts. In the meantime, we are Who Got the Assist. On today's pod, we have team updates to start off with, of course. We're going wild this week, though, as per the pod title, with one of us already knee-jerking a certain big Norwegian out of their side with the game week still live, and with many other notable names in the community already selling prior to game week 10. We talk about a Haaland-less little while in FPL, not necessarily for the full thing, but at least for a little while. And then linked into that, a bit of a chat on short-term punts for game week 11 and possibly game week 12 too, with a feeling surrounding hits and how they fit into the new world of FPL as we know it, of course, with the transfers able to be rolled quite a few more times this year. Plus, of course, our Game Week 11 preview, as always, including best transfers, an equaliser in bold claims, and best captains. It is Monday, the 4th of November. It's halftime during the Fulham-Brentford game, 1-0 Brentford even, at the moment at halftime. No involvement for the one player that we've both got, that being Brian and Burmo. And I'm not sure it will move the needle too much for us either way, even if he did do anything in the second half. He's pretty high owned, so I don't think it will impact us too badly, although a haul would be welcome. In the meantime, shall we crack on with the game week reviews, Tom?
Yes, indeed. And as you're smashing it, finally, you are first.
I am first. So 63 points at the moment, with the additional Boomo 1-pointer at halftime. It's a good week, not going to lie. I brought in Salah for free for Foden and kept Haaland because I had the money in the bank to do it in just one move. Put the armband straight on Mo. I felt that the matchup suited him marginally better. Luckily was proven right in the end, although I was pretty nervous going into the final 15 or so minutes of the Saturday 3 o'clock kickoffs with no returns out of all of my players. At least my captain was the one who did get something. Although I have to admit, at the end of Saturday, I wasn't exactly feeling great about things. One returner in my entire lineup at that point. Felt like there were a lot of issues, and Calvert-Lewin yet again stinking up everything, coming off early and earlier each week now as well. Needs to be a player I definitely need to get rid of sooner rather than later. But then it was all about Sunday and the triple up of Spurs and Villa, mids and attackers in my side. Johnson, Rodgers and Solanke all did the business. Solanke in particular was phenomenal. 2 massive chances, one very neatly tucked away chipped finish over Martinez. And I was one happy camper all of a sudden. So yeah, very happy with them. Really did the business for me. 62 points overall going into tonight. And I think I've pretty much halved my rank from 2.7 to about 1.35. So yeah, very happy, even with Semenyo on my bench for a 10-pointer. he's obviously in situ, ready to come on for the good fixtures to come for Bournemouth as well. So things finally starting to look a little bit nicer overall.
Yep, yet more proof we are not part of the cartel, having not got the news that Lewis was going to be benched. Yeah, you've
Oh
got bench
yeah.
pain. I've got bench pain. Leaf Davis, who were popping up with the goal, a 10-pointer. Yeah, it just wasn't going to happen. My week was literally Brendan Johnson scoring and Rodgers scoring. That was it. The rest of it was just a total car crash. Really, 37 I'm on now. Whatever Boomer gets later on, I think I'm down to 809k. So the downward spiral sort of continues from game week 2. I think I was near 50k, but it's just not really gone anywhere since then. And been, I don't know. I think I've been kind of. We'll talk about this a little bit actually. I've been moderately sort of aggressive throughout the year. Like I hadn't rolled a transfer up until this point and before like game week 2, but equally I've been kind of plodding along, I guess, a little bit, and it's not really done very much for me. I don't think recently. Yes, there's obviously kind of elements of bad luck, and I think that next week my squad is going to just look drastically different. Basically, those two free transfers, one of them's already been used, as Sam may have already mentioned, and we will talk about that in a minute. But yeah, it's been yet another kind of poor week, and yeah, I suppose putting the faith once more into the big robot hasn't really led to results, and it may well be that a change in structure is required to ensure that I can achieve all my sort of transfer targets in my plan going forward. So yeah, I guess a bit of a contrast. I'm a bit more sort of circumspect, considering the future, a bit of navel gazing really, and as we'll kind of just come on to now, I suppose I have already acted. So the knee jerk comes up to the top of the podcast today, going wild without Erling Haaland. So I know those people went last week. I know that the James Planet FPL has obviously been flying the flag for being Haaland all along. My confession is I sold him on Saturday for Cunha. Was I drunk? This is going to be the first question on many minds. No, I wasn't. I've simply had enough bad weeks, Sam. And any player with 1 goal in 5, you're likely to want to shift on, especially if it then enables a whole load of other stuff with your team. Like I mentioned last week that my setup was very much Salah or Haaland, and it kind of feels like the swing is going the other way now. And I don't know, it feels like this might be a bit of a therapy session for me, Sam. You know, you're such a wise man, especially in the ways of FPL, that I suppose hopefully you're going to make me feel a bit better, because I do have a tiny bit of seller's remorse. And obviously there's the usual caveat, he's never a bad pick, etc., and probably is kind of one of the top captaincy picks for the next 2. It definitely is. It's just that I was kind of thinking, well, all right, the pricing on the swing, which obviously shouldn't be like the biggest thing, but it just felt like for the next few weeks, I sat there, made a couple of plans on FPL.team, and going without for the upcoming run, probably up until about game week 18. So over Christmas and New Year, they've got a nice trio: Everton, Leicester, and West Ham, 18 to 20. That's probably the time when I'll look at it. But Brighton, Spurs, Liverpool, Forest, Crystal Palace, Man United, Aston Villa, none of them are bad fixtures for Haaland. But I just kind of think that I can do better in terms of my overall squad structure without him for the time being. I'm not alone in that, which obviously provides some sort of herd mentality, which is quite good. And it does, I don't know, Sam, feels the lowest sort of risk time to remove him. It feels like there's going to be a definitive switch now to Salah supremacy a little bit, especially over kind of Villa and certainly Southampton coming up next. But I don't know what you think about all this, but it does kind of, I don't know, it feels like it's kind of the lowest risk time, and it does feel like whatever's happening with City, it's not quite feeding the beast in the same way. There's underlying data, sure, but there's a lot of, and James mentioned this on his pod today, lots of crosses seem to be kind of coming in as well quite a lot of the time for Haaland, and it doesn't seem to be kind of quite working for him at the moment. So I don't know, maybe the beast is going to be unleashed against Brighton, and I don't know, that would be, I guess that would just sum up the last few weeks for me. But it does feel like the right thing to do. I'm holding back on the other 2 transfers because of Europe, but it felt like kind of, you know, with the swing and kind of being committed to a plan that I liked, it felt like that was kind of the right way to go.
Yeah, absolutely fair enough. And I think if I was feeling, and maybe not this week necessarily, because obviously the outcome's been quite good, but last week, certainly I was feeling the knee jerk a little bit. I wanted to rip up my side. To be honest, even on Saturday evening, I wanted to rip up my side. So I completely understand the temptation to just get rid of someone who's over 15 million and stinking up your side. What, like you said, 1 goal in 5 games for any striker is not really performing at the level you want to be in your FPL side, let alone someone that you're captaining most weeks and is 15 million plus. And obviously, therefore, it comes at the detriment of the rest of your side if you've got him in. So I think the balance and the squad structure that you're able to strike without Haaland in has always looked tempting, even from game week 1. I guess the assumption was that those of us who went with him, that he's captainable most weeks and he's going to rattle in a couple of returns every week, it seemed, especially at the start of the season, and make it worth our while. That's really dried up. It's balanced out to about what you'd expect from Haaland. That's a goal a game on average. So if he runs at that all the way through the season without any hot or cold streaks, a goal a game is probably enough to hold on to. But if you've got Salah, if you've got Saka, if you've got Palmer all coming into a good run of fixtures, you quite simply just can't have all three of those and Haaland. And, well, unless you go for 4 million assets everywhere else, it's just not doable. So a decision does need to be made. And I think, like you said, in most cases now, it is a straight decision between Haaland or Salah. And given, I don't know whether we've discussed it on this pod per se, but it's been talked about a lot, the bonus points that goal scoring midfielders are able to accumulate, especially Salah, whose chance creation is through the roof this season. He's already on 18 bonus points, which is already 3/4 of the way to his total bonus points for last season. And we're 10 games in. So I think we could be seeing some monster hauls from these midfielders, even if they get 1 return a week. We've already seen that with Salah, several double-digit returns on one return here or there as well. Palmer will be similar, got a bonus point from no returns this week. Saka would have gotten, I think it was 2 or 3 bonus points earlier on in the season. Was it against Leicester when they managed to score 4 goals?
He was on 3, wasn't he?
Yeah. That was it. They managed to score 4 goals, no involvement for him, and he was on for maximum bonus for a long time until the correction. So these midfielders, without necessarily doing that much in terms of attacking returns, can still get the bonus points. And I think that just swings the pendulum slightly more towards them. Now, the additional point that I'd mention in your camp is that there are more than 3 other forwards right now that you can pick from that are getting more than a goal every other game right now. And if you're spending half the price of Haaland on those forwards and bolstering elsewhere, it just makes logical sense to be looking at them and thinking, I'm kind of wasting my money here. If I've got a Chris Wood, I've got Jackson, I've got Solanke now as well back on the menu. Cunha is going to be really popular. All of these players are banging in goals for fun right now and good on the bonus points too. A lot of them on penalties as well. You can easily build a forward line that you can trust without needing to rely on Erling Haaland. And with the fixtures to come for some of those midfielders, the captaincy is not really that much of a factor in the next few game weeks. Now, I don't know whether you want me to continue my monologue because I've been talking for quite a while, but there is an argument against all of that, which I'm a Haaland owner. I've already got Salah. So there is an argument to hold on to him for the next 2 because of the matchups, which again, cut into my monologue right now, absolutely, if you want to, and we can go into the negatives in a second.
No, I definitely wouldn't be advocating selling if you've got Salah already. And I don't know. I guess every week now, I guess I suppose there was potentially a bit of exceptionalism about Haaland. Like Haaland is Haaland. In the first few weeks, you were kind of thinking, oh, he's inevitable, he's the robot. Now I suspect that there's been a bit of confidence shaken in him, and that definitely has made me kind of think, okay, maybe I can kind of take it on a little bit. As you say, there's the underlying data which suggests one a week. Is that possible to take on? And principally as well, it's the timing. So he's top for sales at the moment this week, so it's not like a massive movement. At the moment, it's 200,000 sales out, but I suspect that will multiply as the week goes on and people actually make their decisions. It felt like a bit of a kind of a change of wind almost, and I suppose now for me, I see him as becoming. We were saying this about Palmer a few weeks ago. Indeed, you've still got this question yourself, that he's part of the wheel of FOMO, isn't he, with the big four? And the big four, of course, being Saka, Palmer, Haaland, and Salah. It's the wheel of FOMO every week. Like, are you going to get lucky and avoid the the smash from the players that you don't own? And if you're able to get 3 of them, it's just kind of which one. Because I think there was a way to get to Haaland, Saka, and Palmer for me. There was a way to get to Salah, Palmer, and Saka for me. There's no way to really put all 4 of them in, apart from if you go kind of a max differential sort of setup like we kind of sampled a couple of weeks ago. I don't know. It does feel like there's a little bit of a period now where you can take it on. It's taken me a little while, obviously, to get to that point where I feel like I can. But to your point, I wouldn't be advocating moving on for the next couple of weeks if you were in a position where you could get both Salah and Haaland anyway, like you've got.
Yeah, so that's a good point. And to just wrap up my sort of pro Haaland movement, as an owner, maybe there's a bit of bias creeping in and maybe I'm being a bit stubborn, but the last 2 game weeks, he has accumulated 3.4, 3.5 XG by himself. So he has been unlucky, or unlucky, maybe not the right word, but he just hasn't been burying the chances. At least he's gotten the chances, which is more than I can say for the other 2 of my strikers over the last few weeks. So to get rid of him is always going to have risk attached to it, especially when the next 2 games, they are going to be playing against very high lines. Brighton especially, I like the look of, because Brighton will be playing at home. Dunk is out as well. And we already have seen it twice so far where Brighton have been caught on the halfway line with their high line on the spin, and players like Foden, De Bruyne, who might well be back this weekend, he's in the squad for the Champions League tomorrow. They could be back to their, or close to their creative best come the weekend. And if that's the case, if Haaland's getting the sort of XG numbers that he has in the last couple of weeks, then it's only a matter of time before he does start returning again. So yeah, like you say, it's what you do with the money. And if you've already got Salah and Haaland, I don't think there's any need to sell Haaland this week. With Saka and Palmer playing each other, both decent enough defenses, I think you can probably leave it for a week. Whereas next week, Palmer runs into Leicester, Saka comes into the start of his good run of fixtures, and obviously Salah has Southampton. So I think there's a separate discussion to be made next week where it's going to be a lot more tempting for me, even with Salah, to get rid of Haaland to enable me to get towards that more premium cluster of midfielders. Whereas this week, I don't really feel any urge necessarily to get rid of Haaland to bring in someone who has either Arsenal or Chelsea to play. So yeah, I think you can hold on to him. I would expect points to come, but 15 million is a lot to be spending on a player that you might not want to even captain this week. And later on down the line is, for me anyway, almost a certain transfer out in next week ahead of game week 12, where I'll want to be getting to Palmer ASAP.
Yeah, no, exactly. But I think there's always going to be a consideration to be made surrounding making sure that you can get to free. I think that's going to be the best kind of way forward. And as I said, hoping that wheel of FOMO doesn't hit you. I suppose it's always going to be a question of how you can best kind of psychologically manage it. And I don't know, I'm quite disengaged from FPL unless the chip's being played. We found that recently, and so I think that'll probably be okay. Not disengaged from FPL, but disengaged from the rough and tumble of week to week, unlike how I used to be. I do wonder and marvel at the butterfly effect, I suppose, of like a few little decisions that we both made a wild card and subsequent decisions going forward, like how it's kind of led to us both having dramatically different squads. And I think that's to this season's benefit, despite the fact that we've both had a few kind of rough weeks. Like, I think that there's nothing more kind of exciting taking a step back at seeing how different the squads are and how points come from different places and how the impetus is on you to kind of back those plans that you're making, or if you're kind of playing it on the fly, back those impulses that you're kind of getting to. There's always an inevitable question, isn't there? Like if you've kind of been steadfastly holding to no Haaland for a long time, or you sold him last week, etc., etc. Like, was it a mistake to hold Haaland for as long as you did? And I think that you've kind of neatly made the point that I was going to make surrounding the XG, which still, I suppose, acts as a kind of a reinforcement for why you keep if you're in your situation, at least for this week. But then, as you say, next week you've then got a consideration to make, because how do you get to Parma if you're also holding Salah, and you also need to figure out how you're going to probably get Saka back as well. So there's swings and roundabouts, really. Yeah, there's swings and roundabouts, aren't there? Really. I mean, there's a Forest and 12 for Arsenal, high flying Forest. So maybe we're looking at that and thinking, oh, okay, it's not too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with Saka, I'm less pressed to bring him back in urgently at the moment. We know how phenomenal he is, but Palmer for me is the priority. We've seen week on week the threat he poses, and the run of fixtures that Chelsea have is absolutely ridiculous after this next game is out of the way. So I think for me that's the must have next week that I'm already missing. Whereas with Saka, I would love him. Don't get me wrong. I would love the triple up of premium midfielders, but I feel like I can bide my time a little bit longer rather than taking hits to jam in all three of them at once and do some serious surgery in my squad. I think I can probably just leave it a week or two and figure out another pathway to do it without necessarily taking massive hits to do so.
Yeah, and that leads us nicely actually on to the next sort of point. I think that it's always going to be potentially circumstantial, I suppose, in terms of selling Haaland. But yeah, short-term hits and the short-term punts and hits in FPL 2024, 2025 with the new mechanisms of the free transfers rolling. Maybe also a failure to restrain myself in terms of making free transfers has kind of got me to this point. But yeah, just to kind of zero in on myself again, just because I love talking about myself. Salah in is one option. I don't think I'll be doing this, but you could also, and someone suggested to me earlier on, I could go for Son for a 1 week captain, tie up a transfer, and go to Salah for Southampton in 12. I know we always say sort of a plan for the longer term, but I mean, is there any headroom in this sort of thing nowadays, Sam? Like, it does seem that these sorts of more wacky, potentially in the past frowned upon maneuvers are becoming a little bit more popular, just to kind of play the game week in front of you more than ever before. Not that we're saying that we never would have done in the past, but especially if you've got more free transfers available, maybe not looking so much at me actually for this, because my free transfers are quite restricted. But if you are sat on kind of 3, 4, 5 free transfers right now, use your wild card, but you've got quite a kind of decently serviceable team, you've got a fair bit of money. Do you reckon there's a bit of scope for this week buying a Son, and we'll come back to this in captains as well, but buying a Son or maybe captaining a Son if you've bought him in just for 1 week almost, and then maybe looking to pivot to a Salah or maybe a Saka next week?
So generally speaking, about the wider point, I think what we've already seen this season is if you're willing to take a bit of short-term pain and roll the transfers when your team isn't ideal, you can kind of use that banked extra transfer, a couple of transfers in a week where you think there is high upside on picks that may be a little bit unfashionable in any other week. You've kind of got that opportunity up your sleeve where others just won't be able to get there. And right now you're in a position where you could maybe take a 1 week punt on Son if you wanted to. So I really like that. I can talk from my own experience. A couple of weeks ago, it doesn't always work out the way you want it to. No. I brought in Foden and Son for free transfers. I had 3 frees and used 2 of them on them, and it did not work out in any way as planned. Now, obviously, Son had the second goal taken away from him, or the assist taken away from him, whatever it was, which didn't help. But it does also go the other way. And if you're using free transfers, it can leave you in a bit of a sticky scenario if you're not careful. So future planning, even when you've got the spare free transfers, is still crucial. And I think one thing to note this season, I think we all get quite excited by the idea that you can roll up to 4 or 5 free transfers if you're disciplined. We still get the same amount of free transfers this season. Like overall, we still get the same amount. You don't get any extras this year. You get your 37 frees as well as your wild card, as well as your free hit. I might be getting the maths wrong slightly there, but the difference to last season isn't any greater. We haven't got more free transfers to use. It's just about the benefit you get if you are able to stay disciplined or have a great side for a couple of game weeks to roll the transfers and therefore attack more aggressively later on down the line. The net transfers you're still able to use to impact on your team are exactly the same as they've always been. So we'll get on to sort of the hit discussion, of course, in a second, but that is just a note to say that it's not just wild season where we can just make all the transfers we want and we'll just get replenished with 3 or 4 free transfers in a couple of weeks. You do need to still kind of earn those transfers by being disciplined, by making smart moves and therefore avoiding moves in following game weeks. And that's a situation I've got myself into where I would love an extra free transfer this week because it means that I could get rid of Calvert-Lewin without committing to a hit next week. And obviously I don't have that ability now because I've spent a few weeks ago where I probably didn't really need to. So that does happen. Now, in terms of Son himself, the upside's there. Ipswich is a great fixture, home game on pens. I would say if I had the spare free transfers, I'd be maybe a little tempted, but given his fitness concerns at the moment and the way Spurs are sharing around the goals, I personally don't think I'd go there now. If I only had a couple of free transfers, let's say, if I had 4 or 5, then I would be much more tempted. But again, like I said, you don't get extra free transfers and that could impact you down the line.
The other way to bring in hits as well. That I've got Watkins as well, who's also pissing me off to a lesser extent than Haaland is, but still pissing me off. And I could even if I get Salah, I could do Watkins to Slanky on top. So I think that kind of fulfills the brief for being a short-term punt, doesn't it? With Ipswich left and next, I think there's definitely perhaps a feeling that he could maybe be almost the top line captain for the week ahead. I do think I'd up on Salah, but he is an example of the sort of player that you could bring in for this. I know there's Man City up next in 12, and decent-ish home game against Fulham in 13, and then the Dom Slanky derby, Bournemouth in 14. But you keep that sort of high-ish price point occupied, and plus, principally as well, I've then got money to spend elsewhere, i.e., probably bringing Saka back for one of my mid-priced options who are kind of in my midfield. So, I mean, Solanke, Sam, maybe is a different kettle of fish to Son, different position in terms of FPL, and maybe one that I suppose again is going to be garnering some interest for the week ahead. So I don't know. That's another kind of option that's on the table for me, and it's one that I'm seriously considering, honestly. But it is a hit, and that's something which I know there have been quite a few people who have been playing it, as it always was, taking hits each week, or being kind of hit friendly. But I think this year I've definitely been a lot more conscious about hits because I guess negativity a little bit becomes magnified, as we said pre-season. The disadvantage that you get every week because hits are so much rarer at the moment. I mean, Nick always said, didn't he, that it's a striker's goal that you're selling if you take a hit, which kind of helps contextualize that feeling about taking a hit. And there's the butterfly effect as well, which kind of feeds into it. So little transfers like Mateta pre-wild card for me, Garnacho a couple of weeks ago, when I could have rolled. Like those things have limited my flex. So I need to try to be kind of, I don't know, more conservative. But if I am kind of trying to be more aggressive, there is the option to go Slanky this week rather than kind of have Watkins, who is facing my defender in Trent, who I can't really move on right now, but will be moved on. 13, I think, is on the plan. And it does kind of, the Ipswich fixture does look pretty plumb. It does look one that I want double Spurs in. I'm going to feel like, in contrast, having Watkins against Liverpool, who are the best XGC on the performers, versus having a player that I'm, spending 4 on, but playing the XGC worst performers. It does feel like that could be a punt worth taking over the short term. I'm not too concerned with the City game, given how they're looking this year. Could that be a bit more amenable perhaps than going Son, especially if we're getting Son over Salah, it does kind of feel like a lot more iffy. Whereas given the options as you mentioned that are on the table in the forward slots, taking a hit on Solanke for this week, you bank the points if you do get another kind of double-digit haul, which does look like, feasibly that could happen. I don't think anyone would be surprised that a goal and assist, 2 returns against Ipswich. You bank them, you see what happens in the Man City game, and you kind of take it from there. But does that feel kind of a bit more okay in this regard?
Yeah, I think so. I think out of the two, I'd probably be more tempted to twist and go for Solanke than Son right now, mainly just because of fitness issues. And I think I could reliably count on Solanke to get the 90. And also, if Son's coming off earlier, then Solanke's probably on penalties, if he's not already, when Son comes off as well. So that could be an extra benefit too. And I think the later on the game goes, the more it will open up against Ipswich, and the more Ipswich defence will probably tire a little bit. Solanke will be able to find those half spaces in front of the 2 centre-backs from those cutbacks like he did against Aston Villa. So I do really like the matchup. I think it's a phenomenal one. But if I've learned anything from FPL over the last few years, and let's face it, it's not much, but if I have learned anything, it's that taking hits for players for single game weeks, but just for a one fixture focus, it just doesn't ever really seem to work out for me. And that might just be my personal experience, but I feel like you're putting so much pressure on that one fixture to go exactly as you want it to, when on average, even if he gets 1 return, like you say, it's a striker's goal if you're taking a hit, and it might be something that kind of forces you down another pathway that you don't want to otherwise go down. I think it can be quite difficult to kind of map out all of those different possibilities. However, what I would say with Solanke is it doesn't have to be a 1-week punt. Now, we've already seen with Solanke it is feast or famine, but when he's feasting, it does look pretty good. So he's had over 1 XG in I think 3 different fixtures this season already. He obviously missed a couple of game weeks as well. In others, he's had less than 0.1 XG. So it does go the other way. But if he's got the right matchup and Spurs are on it, then he could be the one to easily get 2 or 3 goals in any given game. And I don't think we need to necessarily limit ourselves just to that Ipswich fixture. There are still good fixtures, as you read out earlier, to come after the Man City game as well. So I think I would probably be more tempted to go for Solanke, even for a hit, if I was convinced that he's still a good hold over the next 4 or 5 game weeks, which you might come to your own decision that he is a good hold for the next 4 or 5 game weeks. What I would say, though, is there are other strikers right now who have good fixtures for a longer period of time, who all maybe not tick all of the boxes Solanke does, but certainly a lot of them, that I think you can bring in without necessarily having to take a hit this week. You could bring in next week and make it worth your while in the longer term. Now, again, I'm sat here as a Solanke owner, so obviously I've not really got to think this through too much. So there's a lot more thinking to be done, but I've experienced 3 weeks of almost 0 XG from him. So it does go both ways. So I think there's a lot of recency bias going on with Spurs and Solanke in general right now. And just don't get too overexcited thinking that every week's going to be like this. It's been frustrating at times as well.
Definitely has. I mean, a couple of things though. One, as you probably know, Spurs are top for Team XG. So you said earlier on, if you think Spurs are on it, well, I mean, the underlying data would seem to suggest that. And if by watching them, yeah, and Solanke as well, yes, okay. I think there might be one of those where I think he's like 3rd for non-pen XG for this year.
Yeah.
So you predicated on 3 games, isn't it? And you've had 2 games with just absolute rubbish, of 4 games, I should say, actually. So it's one of those where if you take the hit now, try to hope that you get it back that week. Watkins himself has been a bit annoying, honestly. There were a couple of occasions in the last game where you kind of, I know it's kind of just too far for him. It's not kind of quite come together, but it's got Palace in 12, Chelsea in 13, and then during the kind of the I guess, more compressed week. So one of those is coming up between game week 13 and 15. You know, when you have 3 game weeks in 7 days, and there's Brentford and Southampton in those. The only problem with that is whether he will play all of those with Duran breathing down his neck. I just don't know.
Mm,
It's one of those that kind of concerns me enough, especially because I'm not going to go deeply into my plan because that's boring for everybody. But within that, saving the money, i.e., going from Watkins to Slanky, i.e., freeing up 1.4, does really help a lot in terms of just fleshing out elsewhere. So it's a tough
yeah.
one. I think there's pros and cons, as always, of all of these things. Taking the hit is not ideal. Believe me, it's not ideal. I don't love it. But it does sort of, again, maybe feed into being slightly more aggressive. I basically just want to be you, Sam. As I said earlier on, without the Calvert-Lewin. But I want my team to be yours with a Palmer over a Calvert-Lewin. That's effectively what I'm going to end up being, isn't it? So, yeah,
Yeah.
it does feel like there's a lot more kind of, I don't know. It feels like I'm going to give myself a bit of a mountain to climb next week from the off, but with the players that I then have, it doesn't feel too much like I'm chasing my tail, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, look, again, we kind of usually end up advising not to take hits in single game weeks, but in the on the side of taking hits, it is very good to get yourself back in a position of strength and getting in front of the game again, and taking a 4-point hit to, if you really truly believe that you can get back on the front foot and get ahead of what the next template is going to be, then by all means, it's worth doing, because if you truly do get all of those bets correct, then you can steal a march on pretty much anyone by bringing in the players that are still fairly low owned, or a combination of players that are still fairly low owned. That a lot of managers, because the prevailing wisdom is don't take that many hits in single game weeks, you can get there before any of the others. So we've seen multiple times over several seasons past, managers who do play an aggressive way are able to get ahead of the more conservative managers like myself in the early few weeks, and I would still count that as early few weeks now, and get into a sort of unassailable lead where they can then go on the defensive later on in the season and basically just get on a template where they don't really need to go on the attack anymore because they're already ahead of everyone else fighting over the same players. So look, taking a hit, obviously it doesn't ever really feel great at the time you do it, but if you over the next 4 or 5 weeks think that extra 1 goal that you're giving up by taking the hit repays with a bit of interest, then by all means go for it. And it is, I hate the cliche, but it is dependent on what 11 players you're looking at this week. If you're looking at a Calvert-Lewin next to I don't know, a Dunk who's injured in your back line, and a Mikolenko, and maybe triple Arsenal defense, or all of this, and you're thinking I really need to mix this up, then absolutely, then a hit is more wise in your team than it would be in someone who's already got triple premium midfielders and Mbermo and has Cunha next to Chris Wood up top, because they're just not going to need to take one right now. So look at your team. If you think that genuinely, and I'm talking to you specifically now, Tom, as well, if you think genuinely you can get ahead of the next forming template by taking a measly 4-point hit, then by all means do so. And very quickly wrap up by saying, you want my team, I'm double your rank. So you can afford 4 points.
But you've done all the stuff you just said. Yeah, I don't know. It is it's tough, isn't it? I mean, it is one of those where there's lots of different ways to look at it. I do still hold a bit of I've got that residual love for Watkins, and I know what he did to me last year when I removed him. I don't know whether you whether you buy into all the kind of the softer. Oh, there'll be a caged animal Villa. They'd have learned against. They'd have learned what happened against Spurs, and they'll want to capitalise against Liverpool, because I think they're more than capable of doing a job on anybody. Really on their day. And I do think that, you know, the 2 players, I think over the next 4, Slanky probably does. I think Watkins has got Liverpool, Palace, Chelsea and Brentford, whereas, as you mentioned, Solanke has got two slightly better fixtures, I guess, in Ipswich and Fulham in between, either side of the City game, and then the Bournemouth game where he's going to obviously be extra motivated, probably. Yeah, it is difficult. I'm very tempted to just go Solanke for this week, take the hit, see what happens afterwards, and kind of mop up afterwards. With having a bit more extra money to then bring Saka in with less worries, and that's kind of where I am right now. But we'll see by Friday. It's definitely I think I'm kind of definitely on getting Salah in and captaining. I don't think I'd be getting Son, for example. But beyond that, it's a real toss up whether I do a let's take the hit or not this week. It's probably yeah. It could just completely be one of those things, as you said, which does sort of slightly just makes you feel better, doesn't it? If it does if you do go off one week, if you do set up your team up, take a change, make a big change, and you kind of get the positive benefits of that. Suddenly you kind of feel a bit better about FPL, and suddenly you feel a little bit more sort of confidence in the decisions you're making, and the approach that you're taking, and the plan that you've put together, which is kind of what potentially is how I want to be doing it. So maybe a bit more aggression, but we shall see.
I like it.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Can you move us on to the game week ahead? I just need to go for a second.
Of course we can. So we've already looked at the knee jerk. So obviously Haaland out rather, being the knee jerk on the cards for this week. I won't myself be going there. Tom already has, of course, and I think one of the key transfers in, and we'll move to the best transfers now, will be no doubt Dominic Solanke. Otherwise, we're looking at Matheus Cunha as well, who has a fantastic matchup this week against my beloved Southampton. And has looked pretty decent overall this season. Now, obviously, there's an anti-argument against Cunha, which will be that Wolves have been a bit naff so far this season and haven't really been up to much. In fact, still haven't won a league game this year, I don't believe, and haven't won in a long time. But the data for Cunha is actually pretty good. The bonus points, a bit like Salah, are ridiculously good. If he gets a return, he's very likely to be in the bonus points very quickly, as we saw in game week 10, as I'm sure we'll see in the next few game weeks. And the run ahead is absolutely exceptional as well. So a bit of a cut price option up front that ticks a lot of the boxes. And I can completely see why a lot of managers are going there this week. And with Tom back at the mic, what do you think of that?
Well, I bought Cunha, so
there you go.
I'm all in. No, so a player who, given how shocking Wolves' fixture run was, is 8th for bonus overall for players. It obviously just shows what he can do. I know the Above Average Boys pointed out that he forward getting bonus after getting just an assist is really difficult this year, and has been previous years as well. And I know he's essentially Wolves' number 10, but the routes to points, I suppose, and being on penalties too, is what sort of draws me in a little bit. Like, I know, as you've referenced, Wolves haven't been the greatest, but equally, I mean, they've scored in pretty much every game, haven't they? They've played this year. In terms of that very, very complex metric, goals scored, they're actually mid-table for this season. So it's not the case. Yeah, I mean, I'm not interested in Night Nori, for example. I've got zero. I haven't really got much interest in backing that defense, and a lot of defensive points do come from the clean sheet. So I wouldn't be doing that. But offensively, despite everything else that's going on, I'm more than okay with those fixtures that you referenced. Having a bit of a punt on Cunha at that price, and hoping he does become the next Chris Wood. That's kind of what I'm hoping.
Yeah, I think the odds are good.
A remontada, and hope, if there's two ways you could go, Sam. He could be Chris Wood, or he could be Calvert-Lewin. The fact is that he's posted enough points over the last few weeks, over the last 10 game weeks, to make me think, maybe he's in that kind of second forward slot for me, at least, the one to kind of be going with. Because I'm you got to look at the fixtures if you're buying forwards around that price point, and I think that's absolutely fine to do. You're not expecting them potentially to return every week. Obviously, we hope all of our players return every week, but when it's not the big four, or this week or this season at least, Bumo or Chris Wood, you're expecting some sort of variance, and you've got to hope that the fixtures do tip that variance in your direction. That's basically it with Cunha. I do really like him. I think that he's absolutely fine. But there are a few other options out there, aren't there, Sam? So, I mean, you were looking at Jan Wissa potentially as your kind of, if you were to throw out Solanke and commit yourself to next week potentially needing a hit. I mean, he's looked very...
Calvert-Lewin, not Solanke. I'm not getting rid of Solanke.
Wrong Dom.
Wrong Dom.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Not now.
Yeah. I wouldn't be doing that. But yes, so if you were looking to toss him out, there's definitely a bit of interest potentially in Wissa, who has come back, hasn't done anything tonight, unfortunately.
No, so at time of recording, both Raul Jimenez and Wissa have gone off without a return, either of them, around the 70th minute. Both of those were high on my list for replacements for Calvert-Lewin. I think if I had the money spare, or a couple of free transfers to kind of make the money spare, I would go Cunha, no doubt whatsoever. I prefer him over both of those options because, again, like you say, there are just so many routes to points. He's so talismanic for their side, or sort of, can you be beta talismanic? It's kind of alongside Fran Larson, like they just seem to farm everything. And even if he's the one creating, if he's getting bonus for it as well, I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah, co-talisman, yeah.
Yeah, co-talisman. I love that. So I'm very happy with him. It's just I don't have the money to get there. So I was looking at Wissa or Jimenez. I was kind of using tonight as a bit of a scouting mission, which is why I mentioned to you that I would be keen on making that move tonight in case there was some sort of price movement. And then I would be locked out of getting at least Wissa. I think Jimenez I can just about get to if there is a little wiggle in the prices tonight. But neither of them have really done much tonight. So I might need to have a bit more time to think that through. And maybe it means that neither will change in price too much either. One way or the other, though, Calvert-Lewin has got to go. He is just awful. And whilst the data XG wise is actually better than Cunha so far, there's one key point that I'd like to raise at this juncture, and that is that Cunha is good at football. Dominic Calvert-Lewin just doesn't seem like he is in any way capable as a Premier League striker right now. Now, look, these things turn around pretty quickly, and I could be saying this now, and in the 2 weeks, he could become the Calvert-Lewin we saw 2-3 years ago, but something just isn't happening for him right now. And Beto came off the bench against us, instantly made an impact. Obviously, there was the offside goal, which he took really well, broke the line well as well, was very, very close to being played on. And also, just before we scored our what ended up being winner, he hit the crossbar from a really good chance as well. But I don't think that would make me less interested in Beto. If I was Dyche, I'd almost be more keen that he's getting in those areas, getting the chances, and obviously the well-taken goal that was offside after scoring the week previous as well will be very encouraging. So I do think that there's a very real chance that Calvert-Lewin comes out of the starting lineup against West Ham and Beto comes in, which makes it quite a good jumping off point for me and any remaining Calvert-Lewin survivors.
Are there any?
I don't think there are. Or if there are, then I need some sort of support group set up for it.
Probably aren't saying anything, are they? Let's be fair. Just crying.
I'm the only one still talking about him. But I need to move off of him to someone. And the problem I've got is I've only got the one free transfer, and I wanted ideally to roll it this week so I could do the Palmer Haaland switch for free. So if I make a move this week, it's basically for a hit. Because I need to make 3 moves in the next 2 weeks. So one way or another, there is a hit coming. Or I could just start Calvert-Lewin, hope that he starts, and hope that he somehow picks up form against West Ham, or just start Rodgers against Liverpool and avoid the hit. But again, that would still leave me with Calvert-Lewin next week and the week after and the week after. So I honestly think even if I'm committing to a hit the following week, it's still the best call to get rid of him. It's just a matter of who do I take him out for? Possibly even someone like Danny Welbeck or João Pedro if he's been fit.
Strand Larsen as well.
Strand Larsen, yeah, good shout. Didn't
yeah.
really know. Yeah, didn't really think about that. I don't love the data on Strand Larsen though. I must say it's not great.
I agree.
He is overperforming. I really wish I had the money for Cunha. I massively prefer that. But yeah, there are options for sure.
There are.
And lots to consider. Maybe even Evan Nilsson as well.
I think Evan Nilsson would be the only one that I'd also mention, but you own Semenyo, so you're probably less likely to want to go there.
Plus, he gets taken off early quite a lot.
He does. He's got that sort of X starts thing about him rather than X mins, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But I mean, one big chance missed, one chance scored. I think it was against City. He did look pretty dangerous.
He looked good. Yeah.
First season in the Premier League and all that sort of thing. Coincidentally, he's actually got exactly the same XGI per 90 as Calvert-Lewin does. But his underlying data is over the last kind of few years in terms of the FBref kind of scouting report, which I was looking at earlier on today. It was all pretty good. It was all pretty sort of exciting. And at Porto as well, he performed pretty strongly. So I mean, it's one of those where you can probably, for you in your case, I'd maybe just kind of put my faith in the fixtures engendering form with a Strand Larsen, maybe. I do think Cunha's got those route to points, but it looks like he's sort of playing the João Pedro sort of role a little bit, where he's kind of the number 10-ish, the 9.5, I suppose, is how you might want to put it. Whereas I don't know. It does sort of feel like Strand Larsen's going to be getting on the end of those. I don't mind this. The fixtures for them do run out on game week 14, so it does feel like a bit of a shorter term one. Whereas Strand Larsen or a Cunha, like I've gone with, you can kind of be happy, kind of stick with them until Boxing Day, I think it is, or maybe even all the way up until the New Year, because I think they've got, I think it's United, then they got, I think, Spurs, and then I'm pretty sure it's Nottingham Forest after that. So it's not awful. It really is not awful. And Welbeck absolutely fine as well. I mean, we've got Man City next, so if you can kind of hide,
everyone scores against them though. It's fine.
Exactly, you're right. And if you because I think Bryson going to a really good run of fixtures as well. So maybe someone like João Pedro is back on the list again.
Yeah, he's back in training.
Yeah, so game week 12 to 19 to end of the year, they've got another good run. So there's lots of different ways you could possibly go here. I'd almost be, I don't know. I feel like I'd want to back the fixture with Strand Larsen in your situation, but
also a bit cheaper as well. I think he's 5.5, so might enable moves elsewhere.
I'm not saying no to. I wouldn't say no to Neville Wilson, honestly, and then Jimenez as well, despite being pulled off early this week. Still is posting good numbers. So a couple of decent fixtures left for them as well.
My gut is actually telling me Wissa over all of them.
Good.
Even if it's only a few weeks, I just it might be a bit of bias, but I love the way Brentford, other than tonight, of course, with the Jan out goal, just basically just deal in big chances. They create as many big chances as they can for their forwards. And Wissa, if he is playing good minutes, then I think there's a decent chance of him getting a couple of big chances here or there in every game in the next few. I am a bit concerned about him getting taken off on 70 tonight, so I'll have to reassess. But
I feel like that's kind of how he's always been, though.
It's going to be typical. They've got a lot of decent options. Sharda came on for him tonight, so I would see that happening again in the future. And it looks like so far that Brentford have been wholly outplayed by Fulham, which is surprising, although they are still in the lead with a couple of minutes to go. Yeah, the forward line for me is a bugbear of mine. I haven't got it right so far this season, and I'm very keen to make sure that the next transfers I make, especially for that budget forward, is the correct one. So some thinking needs to be done. And then next week, I'll have some fun trying to pick my Haaland replacement when I boost up Johnson to Palmer, probably. At the moment, I'm really liking the look of Isak. So we'll see how that goes.
Me too. I've been thinking about maybe going with him, leaving Watkins for a bit, and then going with him. The other name that people are going to be screaming at us is the player who's most brought in this week, Would surprise you that's Christopher Grant Wood. And
Grant's
it's
the middle name. Wow.
yeah, 230,000 transfers in for Wood, over 200,000 transfers out for Haaland. So I don't know, maybe we're switching around there. I'm
Mhm.
not going to read off the full list this week because obviously the game week's still in play. But notable that he is, this year's Almiron, this year's Lingard. Just feels like there's that sort of semblance of inevitability about him. Although they also scored 2 and 2, Sam. But yeah, I don't know. I think if you haven't been on Wood thus far, Newcastle home next game is obviously a big game for him as well, having been kind of shunted on by them and they didn't need him anymore after they bought him to relegate Burnley effectively.
Mm.
And then the solidity of that Arsenal defence. After that, I mean, I think it's fine if you're going there, and fine if you just want to be like, right, I need to cover this problem, especially if you're playing for mini leagues rather than playing for OR. It does feel like for managers like us who have missed all of this, missed the boat entirely, it's almost best just accept that rather than jump on kind of the dying embers of it. Maybe it will continue throughout the year. Maybe we'll have to just be like, right, okay, I need to get him in regardless. But I don't know. I don't know whether that's going to happen to the same extent as a Danny Ings or something like that. Even Danny Ings kind of eventually came to a bit of a stutter, which was when I bought him, which is probably what's informing my kind of thought on him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting with Wood. I'm not completely convinced it does stop, you know. I think obviously Newcastle's a big game, and at home I can see Nottingham Forest doing quite well against Newcastle. And the data for Forest is really encouraging. They're set up really well. Everything's going through Chris Wood. I can certainly see it continuing in that match. Obviously, got a couple of rough fixtures, but in the middle of all of that, they've got Ipswich at home. I think, is it game week 13? So that's going to be a huge week for him, you'd think. And honestly, a good striker, and I've said this season on season, a good striker in a team that's operating around that striker and creating chances almost primarily for them can score against pretty much anyone. So I tend to look a little bit less at the fixtures for a striker than I do with any other position. Again, that might just be my bias talking. I might be getting that one wrong, but I do have a little bit of a feeling that what would change to make Chris Wood just stop scoring at the moment. I'm just not sure the things that could change are going to. I don't see Nottingham Forest just completely dropping off and not creating chances for him. And I think he's finishing pretty well at the moment. So I think for the price, he's very good. And again, people will have probably been shouting at their screen, listening to this with me not saying I'm going to bring him in this week. The only reason he's not on my menu at all is because I can't afford him. Otherwise, he'd be in the mix with Acuna if I could afford him as well. And I think despite the fixtures, I actually am tempted to say it will probably continue for a little while yet.
Yeah, fair. I think is it stubbornness or is it just realization that perhaps you kind of want to be on the next boat out rather than the one that you may have already missed. There's no point in jumping in the sea and swimming after it. That's for sure. And the other one, the other transfer maybe to mention here, I've got Garnacho already, but analytics people will probably also be thinking about this is Bruno Fernandes, Sam. A player that you started the season with, had a
ahead of the times,
rather fun time with, that's for sure.
Oh, he's the best.
The penalty this week. There's no point in even discussing the SGI, which is obviously always good. The penalty this week was obviously a bit of relief for embattled analytics managers who are about to have takeoff after review, which coincidentally tells me the moves that I wanted to make has been good ones this week. So hey, sign me up, lads. Yeah, I mean, if you are kind of looking to make a midfield move this week for whatever reason, Sam, would you be considering Fernandes with Leicester, Ipswich under the new manager, and then Everton the next three?
Yes, I would if it didn't impact my plans to get towards someone I deem more important, like a Palmer or a Saka in the next few weeks. If using that extra transfer on a midfield spot, and midfield spots are precious this season because there are so many high performers in there, if I felt that buying him this week would impact on my ability to get to Palmer next week in my specific scenario, then I would probably just avoid, because whilst again I'm probably hotter on Bruno than most, I've started the season with him, I do quite like him. He has undeniably had the impact of a team around him that just aren't able to finish their dinner. So he can create all the chances he likes. If the strikers aren't burying the chances he creates for them, then there's not really much he can do. And whilst he got a high XG this week, a lot of that was on the penalty, or at least over half of it was on the penalty. So I don't want to just get carried away on this sort of new manager bounce theme. There will be a bit of a bounce, but again, they're going to end up playing a new system. So whether that impacts Bruno negatively or not, we'll have to wait and see. I would assume that he's a quality operator and he'll still do all right no matter the system. But I think unless I had several free transfers spare and it didn't impact on my other moves, I would probably just give it an avoid, as tempting as it is, because the fixtures are great. But yeah, I think I've been maybe just because I was burned too recently. Maybe that's the reason. That could easily be it.
I'm coming out. I'll be coming at that fresh, but yeah, I mean, there's definitely a world where I was kind of, before I decided on a slightly more aggressive path, where I was looking this week at doing Watkins to Cunha and then doing Garnacho to Bruno. I still quite like it. Like, Bruno is conceivably a bit like Watkins, but like Trent, like a pseudo premium or a cut price premium, however you want to put it. One of those players who could threaten the wheel of FOMO later on in the season, especially if Moram comes in and does the job. I think, despite him having a bit of a stinker of performance, Garnacho, I think I'm kind of obliged to just kind of stick him there and see what happens. I wouldn't be surprised if in game week 12 that Moram comes in and just kind of thinks, okay, not really for me, given how Garnacho does have a few sort of issues.
United fans aren't liking him at all at the moment, are they?
No. I think I'll leave him for Leicester. Hope that the fact that he was pulled by that Rashford was pulled by Van Nistelrooy over him is a good sign, and kind of see what happens there. I mean, it won't take, but United fans being United fans, if Garnacho scores next game, that'll all be forgotten. So, hey, there we go. All right, cool. Bold claims this week, Sam. Quite a lot going on, isn't there? There's another point that's an equal.
Another point on the board. Yeah, we're doing well this season. We're getting bold claims left, right, and centre. So I've got an equaliser. Spurs Villa. I think got you a point last year with a 5-goal plus for this exact bold claim, and it secured me a point as well in the last few minutes. And I have to say, coming out of that game, I couldn't have been much happier in any given way, because all of the goals were scored by my players in that game, which is, bar the Maddison one, but Solanke assisted that as well. So it all worked out rather nicely for me. So yeah, 4-1 Spurs, 5 goals plus, bold claim check. Absolutely fine. Great.
Very nice. What's the opposite of a happiness hedge?
Depression hedge.
Happiness multiplier, as I went for last week.
Okay, yeah.
We have a Haaland Hattie versus Bournemouth. Obviously, it didn't happen. So no points for me. Next week,
I'm backing Spurs again, and I did have to check this was a bold claim, so I went onto the bookies and made sure of this. But Spurs to score 5+, I think, is a bold claim. Any team to ever score 5 is a bold claim. They're 4-1, where depending where you look. So I think that's bold enough, and I'm kind of backing them to not do a Spurs and not be Spursy this week. So yeah, I think they're brilliant so far from an attacking point of view this season. Ipswich are very poor defensively, and I think that there's kind of nothing really stopping them from putting them to the sword this week. So fingers crossed.
So bye Solanke, Tom. Okay, all right, thanks, mate. Cheers. Right, see you this week. Excellent. I'm going for, having looked through the fixtures, only 1 clean sheet this week. I was doing I play a price prediction game with a few of my friends, a score prediction game with a few of my friends every week, and this is one of those rare weeks where I was struggling to find a clean sheet. In fact, I think I've said no clean sheets in that, but it does. There's always going to be one somewhere. So I was thinking there's going to be 1 clean sheet this week. max. There's been no others. I'm not going to go as far as to name the team, because I think that would be too bold of me. But I think this is a roster of fixtures. Lots of teams who are quote unquote in form playing each other. Lots of teams that could hurt the other in terms of their kind of their game plan, manager, etc., that'll make this week probably quite goal friendly, and also reflected in your bold claim. So yeah, only one clean sheet this week. Any less, any more, I don't get the point. But hey, there we go.
I like it. Yeah, I really like. You put this in before I did, so I obviously got a little heads up that you picked this, and I was a bit jealous. I thought it was a good one. So yeah, fingers crossed for both of us, but certainly for you as well, there, Tom.
Cool. All right. Wow, so there's a lot of action going on in the in the game at the moment.
Yeah. Last minute winner it seems for Wilson. So that's 2 in the last couple of minutes.
Wilson brace. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, poor Flecken owners. So yeah, best captain for the week going forward. Awful lot going on, depending on your team composition, whatever's going on with you. I think that simply there's a bit of a effective ownership swing, I'd say, behind Salah. And as mentioned earlier on, in terms of me selling Haaland, it does feel like a week to go against Haaland. I don't know if the effective ownership is going to get below 100%, but I do feel like you're kind of looking at maybe for you, Sam, Palmer levels going forward with Haaland. If the sell-off 200,000, so we're at 200,000 sales by Monday. I wonder whether that would at least kind of get 2x, so to maybe 400,000 sales. So especially in the engaged slots, especially with a lot of the big voices having sold off Haaland because they're not in the same good position you are in with having both players. It does feel like kind of going with a informed Salah who does seem to be kind of hoovering up the bonus as well when he does score, in contrast to how he used to be. It kind of feels like that's kind of the vogue captain. Although Son, who we've got in the image on YouTube, and also Slanky, as we've mentioned, both are also kind of quite decent picks. So yeah, quite a lot on the table. Palmer having the Arsenal game probably rules him out, but you've got smaller options as well around. So you probably aren't going to be back in Cunha against Southampton, are you? You're not going to be back in the Wolves player probably. If you do own Bruno Fernandes, this could be a really cool week for you. All it'll take is a penalty. The goal involvement underlying is there. There's a lot going on, isn't there?
Yeah, tons. I really like this week for captaincy because there are legitimate options all across the board. I think the first like when I put the armband on anyone at the start of the week, as we always do in our bus teams, it immediately went to Haaland, and maybe that's just a gut thing, but I do really like the matchup against Brighton, even away from home. I think if anything, that might actually favour them because Brighton will have to come out a little bit and not sit back necessarily. I do quite like the Haaland shout, even with people selling him, almost especially because people are selling him. So yeah, like that. Love Salah always. At home is never a bad shout. Villa obviously just shipped 4 goals to Spurs and will have midweek football, as will Liverpool, but Liverpool have been doing that for many, many years now and have a deeper squad. So you'd imagine they can cope with that fairly well, and Villa might be a little bit on the back foot after a pretty tough couple of days, a couple of weeks even. So I do like that matchup. And as we've already discussed, Salah, all he really needs is one return and he could easily be on for a double-digit haul. So I think the floor is a bit higher for Salah than it is for Haaland. I think with Haaland, you need to expect big points. You need to expect multiple returns to make him a good or a better captaincy shout than the other two. Son fits into the camp with Salah, maybe with the asterisk of minutes being a slight issue. And I do quite like Solanke as well. But I think right now my gut is telling me very marginally Haaland over Salah. But that one could easily go down to the wire for me at the moment. And I'm definitely not committing and locking into Haaland right now.
Yeah, no, I feel you. It's one of those where, like, I think if you do own Haaland now and you're still kind of thinking about it, when you get to the end of the week, you'll be thinking, right, okay, one last ride sort of thing. And I think it's absolutely fine to go with it for the reasons that you detailed there, Sam. What are Brighton for XGC? I've got a feeling that they're not doing particularly well. Like I feel like they're in the bottom sort of quarter for SGC. And
what the type of chances as well?
Yeah, like missing dunk and all that sort of thing. So I think that's absolutely fine, honestly. I do think the effective ownership will probably swing Salah's way, as I've said, but there's definitely kind of options on the board. And if you are following up your bold claim, Sam, like a Solanke, maybe not a Johnson. I feel like he gets kind of one chance a game. He's that sort of character. Those sort of the ceiling is probably 9 or 10 for Johnson. Obviously, I'm hoping that I'm wrong, but he does feel like that kind of guy where he gets 3 big chances a game and scores 1, despite the online data always being quite outrageous. But if you do own Son, and I think that this is a really good week to go for that. There are quite a few people who benched him the week he missed and are still kind of holding him now. And with Richarlison injured, I think that could be quite a good one. Yeah, it is very close this week. I feel like the polls and the EO will probably kind of lurch towards Salah given the consistency. But yeah, it's one of those where I think there's definitely going to be a bit of a split pin, which is always my favourite. These are my favourite weeks until it doesn't go your way.
Yeah.
important asterisks on that assertion.
Yeah, for sure. And I think another big factor here is the midweek football for basically all of these players. Maybe the decision gets made for us during the week. But yeah, at the moment, love the fact that there's going to be a massive divide out there, and I don't think there's going to be one outstanding captain that everyone's going to be picking. So yeah, it could be a very interesting week for a bit of variance in the community. Yeah, looking forward to it.
God, imagine if there's a big injury as well midweek. I mean, that would kind of upend everything, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that was kind of why I was okay with going with Acuna, but there was no way in hell I was going to confirm like Salah as well on top of that. Like, it wouldn't take very much for everything to be thrown into disarray. Even if I won free transfer, there's no way I'd done anything. But with 2, you kind of feel a bit better. If you've got 3, 4, 5, then yeah, to go to your heart's content. Let's move on to the teams for this week. And you are first.
I'm first up. Yeah. So having said all of that, apparently my bus team captain right now is Salah. So shows what I know about my own team and how set my decision is. That will flip flop throughout the week, I'm sure. Latest screenshot is on Mo, of course. I do have double Arsenal defense. I think this is the final week where I really don't like that. And then after that, I'm really crossing my fingers that they turn it around. I don't think it's worth a free transfer for me, again, because I think there are bigger issues in my side. I'm just going to have to hold and hope that they turn it around soon. I've got Lewis starting as well, who I really would prefer not to have right now. But again, it's a matter of priorities. I think there's a relatively decent chance that he doesn't start 1 or 2 of the next few as well. Mikolenko away at West Ham could easily come on for him this week, and I wouldn't mind too much. I would have to try and find out whether I think Lewis is starting before swapping them over. Triple Spurs against Ipswich obviously was a prime reason for me bringing in Johnson and Porro a few weeks ago. So really hoping for big things in that game, as my bold claim suggests. Semenyo comes off my bench. Really happy to own him for the next few weeks. Looks like a great set of fixtures, and Semenyo's been excellent. And then we move into the forward line where Calvert-Lewin is still stinking up my side. So we'll probably need to get rid of him. I could theoretically put him on my bench and just start Rodgers, but I think it's time, and I think that I just need to get rid of him. So I need to make a decision who it's going to be for. Yeah. Who knows? Could be anyone at this point, but my options are fairly limited because of price.
They are. It does feel like you've got kind of Shane Larson, or you've got Evan Nilsson, but you've got Semenyo. So are you going to be doing both?
Yeah. Jimenez.
Yeah, I don't mind Vissa, but that's a time limited option. So you've got to go kind of to game week 14 and figure out what you're going to do there and how you're going to get there. I mean, admittedly, because you've got Rodgers still hanging around, you're probably going to be okay to just deal with that, because it does get a bit better, doesn't it, for Villa in not very long. I think it's game week 14 actually, paradoxically, when they play Brentford, and things are better for them. So yeah, I think you might be all right. And Rodgers scored a tap in, didn't he, this weekend? So is it gonna? Yeah. It's not so much the player, is it? Cool. Yeah, I think you're looking good. You're looking good. You've got a bit more of a captain conundrum than I do.
Yeah, that'll be the big one.
So if you're watching on YouTube, I must apologise. I need to hire a graphic designer. Is there one around, Sam? Do you know one?
Maybe I might know one or
Yeah,
two.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've put a rather an elegant crop of my intended transfers in alongside what I've actually got here. So at the moment, I obviously don't have. It feels like we're like a wild card, doesn't it? I don't have Salah in right now. I don't have Slanky in right now, as I've discussed. Waiting until Europe's done, as you've astutely pointed out. In goal, I might actually play Fabianski this week over Raya, Sam, just because I've got
Yeah,
Palmer as well. I mean, Palmer did
for
have a bit
sure.
of has a knock for some reason. I watched most of that game at my. Admittedly, I was at the in-laws, so I wasn't kind of. I was also attempting to, be a good son-in-law, so I wasn't being too. I wasn't kind of just watching it and it was rapt attention, but I didn't see anything that
I think it was
suggested.
right at the end, and I think it's going to be
Right.
okay.
Oh, yeah. It must have been right. It must have been when the fireworks started. Okay, fine. So hopefully he'll be all right. But yeah, having double Arsenal defense against Palmer does feel like I want to find a way to not kind of go all in on that one.
Hmm.
So maybe I'll play Fabianski. Who knows? Might get some saves. We'll see. He's Everton. Calvert-Lewin scoring goals. Nah, I'm probably all right, aren't I? So yeah, I might give
Yeah, you're
Fabianski a run out
fine.
this week. Still on Trent, yeah, it is what it is. So I know that there's definitely a bit of unrest about Trent. I think he's going to stay until game week 13, and then I think after that becomes a bit of a cash cow, a bit of a piggy bank for moving on. Play Gabriel, of course, big games, could score a goal. I've also got the Rick Lewis issue. I've got Mikolenko too. If I'm playing Fabianski, do I want both Mikolenko and Fabianski in the same game?
0-0.
Don't know. Yeah, hoping for 0-0, or there's Leif Davis, but against Spurs, I don't think that Ipswich are going to be able to put up anything more than the feeble resistance to Spurs at the moment. So there's no way I'm playing Leif Davis. So I think Rico Lewis, because I haven't got any other City players, feels like kind of the least worst option almost. Got
Yeah.
Garnacho, which is lovely. Got Johnson, who's currently the bus team captain.
Love
So
it.
if anything does happen to be this week, it's Johnson who ends up being my captain. But hey, there we go. Obviously the big Spumo and Palmer. Rogers at the moment, I think that he would be the full guy for Salah, because Garnacho's good fixtures for the next three. Need to see what happens next. So it's probably potentially actually quite close between Garnacho and Rogers who goes, but I feel like with the fixture on hand for Garnacho, it's difficult to get rid of him. But that'll go to the wire. If I do get some news, if I'm worried about X-Mins, I don't know.
Yeah, I'd be a little concerned, maybe.
So I don't know. I could end up actually moving to Garnacho to Salah. We'll see. But it's just one of those two. And then Watkins could well go for Slanky. I do like Rogers basically as a eighth attacker for a little while, or in my case, a seventh attacker for a little while. So it is difficult. I will need to see exactly kind of how things pan out over Europe, but that'll be the way that I'm going to go. I think I'm definitely going to get Salah. I think that anything kind of Son related does feel a bit too fanciful. Being aggressive is one thing, but I think going too far that way, especially in the context of what we've seen, is probably a bit. I don't know. It feels a bit wild, but yeah, -4 is definitely on the table for me this week. So one of Garnacho or Rogers out for Slanky for Salah, and Watkins out for Slanky does feel like the way I go. I don't think I'd ever kind of do just Watkins for Slanky and see what happens elsewhere. I feel like that's kind of. I might as well just go with Salah and try to keep it simple. Now I've kind of gone down this path. I feel like if I start getting more complicated, then things start to become, things can unravel even more quickly than they may already will.
And you want Salah long term, right? So
yeah,
if you want him long term, you might as well get him done sooner rather than later and just get closer to the team you ideally want to have over the next 7, 8, 9 game weeks. So yeah, I think if you're ever going to take the hit, do it sooner rather than later. It gives you much longer for it to pay off.
Yep, I feel like that's the way. Definitely, I'll definitely be getting Salah. I think it's just I need to make a decision on. It just looks so tasty, doesn't it? Having a player against Leicester at home.
Yeah, it's an opportunity that
they were absolutely awful. I was like, I literally volunteered to do childcare during the United Chelsea game, and I said that me and my father-in-law would watch that together, just because it was such a terrible game when neither team wanted to score. I don't know whether that will continue into the Leicester game. I'm sure it won't. 5 goals against Leicester's B team. Don't know if the A team are going to want revenge, but we'll need to see. But after that, I think Garnacho is definitely a risk. But maybe I think because I spent the bloody transfer to get him in, I should probably try to give him at least a few weeks at least, and hope that Amorim does see enough about him to keep him there.
Yeah,
cool. All right. Any other business this week?
I don't think so. I think that probably wraps us up for now. Full time in the Fulham game. Obviously, they turned it around, so that was interesting to see whilst we were streaming. Any Harry Wilson owners out there will be cheering, though I don't think there are too many of you.
Person.
The one person, Harry Wilson's relative somewhere, probably. But yeah, in the meantime, thank you all so much for listening. We have been, as always, Who Got the Assist. You can find us on X at WGTA_FPL or myself at FPL Pricey, and on Instagram or Threads at WGTA.FPL. Again, I'm just FPL Pricey on there. If you did enjoy the stream, then please do consider giving us a follow on those social channels, or giving the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening. And if you're watching along on YouTube, then leaving a like and subscribing to us would be greatly appreciated as well. All of those things really do help us out.
Lovely stuff. We hope you enjoyed the pod. Hope we assist you think about potentially going wild in FPL if wild is just selling Haaland. We'll be back next week for our traditional zoomed out international break pods. We were hoping to get a guest on, but sadly they had to pull out. So we're working on it. I hope we give you something interesting, no doubt, anyway, when we speak again. I'm off to play Dragon Age Veilguard now. So yeah, the pod you may hear won't not be as well edited as normal. But anyway, see you very, very soon.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?